Well, hello, everyone. Welcome. Nice to see you there to this Òran Iain Breac MacLeod class. I'm James Ruff. I'm a singer and I'm wire harper as well. And I love putting these two things together, and I hope you do too. If not, I hope maybe this class will bring you into that. I was mentioning yesterday in my class that during all of our pandemic time at home, I've had the great fortune to work a lot with Kenna Campbell in Scotland via Zoom and learn lots of the big Gaelic songs in different forms, the bardic ones, etc., regularly, which included a big time of learning these songs of Ruairidh Dao Morison, a few of them, learning and polishing and memorizing them. And I've just been so interested in them and the whole world up at Dunvegan Castle on Skye that I'm super happy to be able to share this with you and hope you'll be excited by them as well. Funny, I picked up his book. There's a famous book by Willie Matheson, who was a great researcher and singer in Scotland at the School of Scottish Studies, called The Blind Harper, which maybe some of you have seen or have. It's a wonderful book that goes into great detail about his life and about Dunvegan Castle, and includes all the poems, the many, many verses of his songs that we have that are extant. And there are wonderful reasons for learning these and even just reading them, in that they really give us a wonderful window into the life of a professional harper in Scotland in the 17th century. I know my title said 18th century song, and I guess this would be on the cusp of the 18th century. He lived more of his life in the 17th century and then died in about 1714. But again, we get a wonderful view into a life of a harper and how he fit into the clan culture, etc., even in the words of his songs. Also, he, we'll go into this more later, but he was really a minstrel. There were different orders of poetry in Scotland, the fili and the bard and the minstrel, which was more of a musician, and that's really what he was. I'll talk more about that, his poetry. But he was able, maybe because he was a minstrel, but he was able and willing to share lots more of his personal feelings and angst and anxiety and that kind of thing in the text of his songs. So again, we get really a personal view of a harper's life in this clan system. His relationship with his lord, with Iain Breac, which was not always happy, but they were very close and loved each other, definitely. Let's see, we also get a view into the life of the castle itself and how the harp and harpist fit into that, which I'll talk about some, that and the pipers, etc., which is very interesting. Also, interestingly, I found out, I didn't know this, but Ruari Dao, Ruari Dao is the only example we have in Scotland of a minstrel, somebody that wrote his own poetry. He was skilled in poetry and music, wrote his own poetry and sang his own songs to his own accompaniment. So we'll hope to induct all of you into this as well. I might as well put up my little wonderful slide here. So let me pull that up for a second. And I'll put that on and do my share screen. There's... Okay. So here you are. I don't know if any of you have been to Dunvegan Castle before. Yes, no? So here's a wonderful picture of it here. Beautiful, amazing place up in the way north of the Isle of Skye. We'll look at that in a second. Actually, I might as well go through that now. So come on, next. There we go. So here's a wonderful map of Scotland from online. And we can see Skye, which is there is still Gaelic spoken on Skye, is the largest island in the Inner Hebrides. So it's here off the northwest coast of Scotland, between the mainland, the Tír Mór, and the Outer Hebrides, which are out here, which is definitely Gaelic speaking. So Skye is that big, wonderful island right there. And if you've never been, I totally recommend it. It's like my favorite place in the world. So beautiful there. Here's a little closer up now picture of the Isle of Skye, which has a bunch of things mentioned on here. Dunvegan Castle, you can see says Dunvegan right here, is just at the bottom of this big loch Dunvegan, right? So it's a wonderful protected harbor there with the views of the water and the mountains and all. It's an amazing place. Here is a wonderful picture painting from Dunvegan Castle of Iain Breac MacLeod, who was the 15th chief of the Scoil Toromut. That means the seed of Toromut. Toromut is Norman in Gaelic, who came from Harris, from the Isle of Harris. So that's where that branch of the family came to Skye. So obviously it was already quite an old family, an old clan by the time he was the chief. I think I always pictured him like, as we do, in a kilt right out of Outlander, that kind of thing. And here we have in this picture with his great powdered wig and his wonderful fancy clothes. And the more I learn about him, he definitely was in the court of the King of Scotland and knew high people. This was not any little low Outlander kind of thing. He was definitely in the big circles of the high people here. Iain is one way that you can say John in Gaelic, and Breach is weirdly is the word for trout in Gaelic. And as we know, trout skin is speckled. So they use that word as an adjective all the time to show someone that has freckles. It's possible that's what he had. I don't see that in the painting. Breich Nambo is the word for smallpox or cowpox in Gaelic. And it's possible he had smallpox, and that was talking about what his skin looked like. We don't know, actually. So that's a wonderful picture painting of him. We'll go into that a little bit more. I'll go into Dunvegan in a minute. So I'll talk a little bit about Ruairidh MacMhuirich now. That was his name in Gaelic, which means blind. Rory Morison was his last name. I spoke yesterday about there are two Ruari Daos, two blind Rorys in our wire harp history, and they often get completely confused and we don't know who is who. This is, of course, the Scottish one. He was, as we know from history and from family history and lore on the Isle of Lewis, he was the eldest son of 6 children of John Morison of Braga Lewis on the Isle of Lewis, which is in the Outer Hebrides. It's just not so far from Skye, really. His name was Iain MacLeod. He's still known by that name on the Isle of Lewis all these hundreds of years later. And the wonderful thing that I learned in this research is that Ruari Dao, who we're talking about, who wrote these songs, didn't just fall out of the sky and just start writing verse in Gaelic. His father was very well educated, was an author of an existing description of the Isle of Lewis that we still have. He was a violinist, a leader and counselor on the island, and was known for being an extempore poet, that he would just spout off verse to people on the island out of the blue. And so obviously Ruairidh Dao, the harper, took some of this in and was able to work with that in his life. The father was descended, they both were descended from Alan MacMhuirich, who was the last of the 12 hereditary Brehavan, or judges, on the Isle of Lewis. So this again was a high family judgeship was passed down in the families. He owned a 16 penny land, which was the largest farm holding on the whole Isle of Lewis. So he was a gentleman, the father was a gentleman, and Ruairidh Dao was a gentleman as well. He was not from a poor family. Like 2 of his brothers, Ruairidh Dao was destined for the church, and he was sent to Inverness to study at a young age. And while he was there, he fell victim to smallpox and lost his eyesight, and his face was badly disfigured from that. So as we know from other harpers, other wire harpers, the next thing usually that one does is to send people who lose their sight to a harper to learn to play. We don't have total certainty about what the order of events here. It's probable that he already played the harp some and then was sent to Ireland actually to learn, to continue his study and to become a harper really once he lost his sight. There's a tradition of his father saying that it cost more to make Ruairidh a harper than for his two brothers to become ministers of the church. So it was not an inexpensive thing. According to one of Rory's songs, that will the lament for Iain Breac when he died, it looks like Ruairidh was a member of a company of minstrels or traveling entertainers. When he came back from Ireland, it looks like he was not very happy in this, and he writes about being ill-treated with mockery and contempt by the other minstrels, the other entertainers. So he was definitely not happy in this place. We know from history that he called on every baronial residence in his way when he came back to try and find a place to be placed as a maintained harper and not have to travel with these other people. We know that Ruairidh met Iain Breac MacLeod in Edinburgh. Let's see, and Iain Breac was probably in Edinburgh to pay court to James II at Holyrood Palace. He was there to open Parliament in the spring or summer of 1681, and we actually have records of him buying things in Edinburgh, things for his wife and that kind of thing. So we know he was there in like May of 1680. They're thinking that Ruairidh was probably there too, and his travels to find a placement, because his brother Angus, who had been studying at King's College in Aberdeen, moved from Aberdeen to finish his studies at Edinburgh University in 1680. And then we know he graduated in 1683. So his brother was there, and he probably was visiting him when he came across Iain Breac there in Edinburgh. Anyway, we know from the songs, again, they became fast friends and very close and enjoyed each other's company, even in this song that we're going to work on today. And by 1683, Ruairidh was definitely well established at Dunvegan Castle. He was, because as I said, he was a gentleman, he was connected with the family as a tacksman. So he actually had a farm called Clachan, which was just north of Dunvegan Castle, about 3 miles away. And we have records of him actually paying rent to Iain Breac. So he was not like the other musicians who were given land without having to pay rent in exchange for their music making. And this was because Ruairidh was a gentleman in his time. He was actually not allowed, it was not permissible for him to make money as a musician. He could be a trained musician, but not be paid for it, at least on the face value of things. So he actually also had no official status then at the castle in the clan court as a harper. We know this was a personal arrangement between him and Iain Breac, because they really liked each other so much. There's later history, which I won't go into so much. It's interesting, both Ruari Dao and Mary MacLeod, who was famous poet, bardic poet actually, at Dunvegan. She was there and took care of some of the children, like as a nanny, the children of Iain Breac. But she, as a woman, she was not allowed to be an actual bard, but she wrote in beautiful bardic poetry. And she actually, both she and Ruairidh Dao had some falling out with Iain Breac, and they both were exiled from the clan. So at a certain point in 1689, Ruairidh Dao was exiled to the mainland. He then was given a farm to live on and was very unhappy there, being far away from the clan, etc., etc. And he was there when Iain Breac died and didn't hear for like 3 days that he was even dead. And we know that from the lament that he wrote. So he's definitely not happy about that. Here we can look quick back at Dunvegan Castle. I just put a few different pictures of it. You can see from different views of this beautiful castle up on the bluff over Loch Dunvegan there. And I put a little quote from a famous song of the blind harper, Òran. Oh no, this is from the song we're singing, actually. So it says, it's been long since the days that my beloved was in the land. So, and that hints, this song is interesting because we know that it was the first song that he wrote when he was employed by Iain Breac, and it's kind of a mock lament. It's not an actual lament for Iain Breac, but it's just being unhappy that he's not there, that Iain Breac is not there at the castle. It's probably at a time when he was away for 9 months, either in the lowlands or down in England. And so this little phrase is at the end of the refrain that comes back in the song. And it kind of interestingly brings it to a kind of more universal level, actually, that probably why it's still beloved in the tradition. So Iain Breac was one of the last supporters of the Gaelic arts. He employed a harper, we know, Ruari Dao, a piper, who was actually Roderick MacMhuirich, one of the most famous pipers there was, but also a poet. He had a Morison poet that trained in the high literary language of poetry, and also a fool or jester. We know the name of him now, I can't think, but is Andrew something. So he was one of the last people that actually maintained all of these at his court. We have descriptions in other songs by Mary MacLeod, who was there, and also by Ruari Dao, of how amazing it was that he was such a supporter of the arts in this beautiful castle, and that there are many verses in these different songs about being the castle of the goblets, the silver goblets. There was drinking going on, and pipers and harpers and people enjoying this music and poetry at the castle. Here I put a couple little lines from another song, Òran MacLeod, which is a wonderful, beautiful song by Ruairidh Dao, where he says, at the time of early rising, the roar of the drones could be heard. So we know the piper was just like in Outlander or other shows, the piper was playing the pipes in the morning to wake up the people in the castle. And then later in the song, he says, how beguiling was the sound of the harp strings under the play of 2 hands, impressing all with their sweetness. Oops, there we go. Let Karen back in there. Oops, come on, what's going on? There we go. So here we have another view, an old painting of Dunvegan Castle, and a strange, interesting modern mock-up of the Talamor, the Great Hall of the castle. Let's see, we already said that. So that song, this song here is another line from that great song. So in this great song, the great song of MacLeod, it's so beautiful. I love this song where the poet is talking to Echo as personified, and saying, I know, I've seen you before. Oh, you were in the great hall of the poets at MacLeod. And this song is after Iain Breac has died, and he's talking about how sad it is and how it's a song-haunted place. There's no more music there, and it's really where he's talking to Ruairidh. Ruairidh was the son of Iain Breac that became the chief for not for long, but he kind of completely let go of all the musicians and poets and everything, and was totally down in London at the court and spending so much money, all the money of the clan, really. And so Ruairidh Dao is kind of shaking his finger at Ruairidh, the chief. The song is actually still sung to the clan chiefs in Scotland to sort of teach them about what is their role to keep supporting the arts, which is what we're not doing that song today. Okay. Toramat, as I said, is Norman. This is the second son of Iain Breac that succeeded Ruairidh, the bad one, later. So there is a Toramat in the song we're going to sing, but it's not this one. I'll talk about that in a minute. So This song we're doing today, Òran do Iain Breac MacLeod, as I said, is the first song that Ruari wrote under Iain Breac's patronage. We can only really date it between 1681 and 1689, but probably it was from 1683 when he first was there at the castle, at the court. As I said, this is not a lament. It's a great poetic exaggeration describing the separation with Iain. We also, in the song, it's interesting, the poet Ruairidh uses the first person plural a lot. So it's kind of showing he's sort of acting as a spokesman for all the people of the household, really. And as I say that, one of the reasons I one of the many reasons I wanted to work with this song and teach it to you is that it shows the kind of group dynamic in Scottish Gaelic singing, which still exists, actually. It's kind of not a singular art. It's meant to be done in groups and with groups. And this song is a perfect one. It's still in the tradition of Gaelic singing. If you went to a céilí in Scotland and someone started singing this, everyone would know it, and they would all join in singing the séist, which is the chorus or the refrain, and the soloist would sing the verses, and then when the refrain came back, everyone would sing. It's a wonderful convivial kind of atmosphere that's in céilís and in group singing in Scotland. So interestingly, the séist or the chorus of this song is in using lots of vocables, which is, you may have heard of this term before, which is kind of nonsense syllables that appear a lot in Gaelic songs, and especially in refrains. They're a little bit like fa la 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 kind of idea. But sometimes there are little words that actually mean something, but the chorus itself doesn't usually mean anything rationally. It's also interesting, though, that the vocables actually carry the emotional weight of the song. And there are theories, a couple theories, that these words, these nonsense words, actually might be leftovers from the Pictish language, which we don't really know anything about, but we know it was a Celtic language. So it's possible there are little Pictish words that are included in there. And there are other theories that it was even a magical kind of thing, that it was like being used in a magical way. So play with that a little bit. I'd like to move a little bit into the tune, and we'll maybe just kind of learn it on la 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 la, and or da di da di da, whatever you want to do, and maybe even playing it at the same time on our harp. First, I'll show you this picture I have up here. We do have one copy of a historic tune, I should say, which is from the Angus Fraser publication from the early 19th century. Again, this is like a time of collecting tunes, and we know he collected lots of harper tunes. And if we look at the top of this page 17, you can see Iain Breac MacLeod, John Breac MacLeod. So this is a tune that was connected with the words that we have, with the poem that we have. It's possible to sing the song to this exact tune, though we would have to change the rhythms and everything in order to fit them. We'll talk about that in a little while. But the other thing is, when he put these into this publication, you can tell this melody starts down at the bottom of the staff and goes way above the staff to high B's and things like that. It's like written really for instrumental, as an instrumental piece. And if it were sung, we would probably have to take that. That's kind of the refrain. We would probably have to take that down an octave for most people. One of the other big reasons I wanted to do this song is I found out from Willie Matheson, from his book, was fascinated by the idea that he actually says that Ruari Dao and most other people involved in Gaelic singing, there's probably no conscious effort in writing music to be sung in Gaelic, but instead they're almost always using tunes that they know or have heard or that are already in the tradition, and then they write words to go with them. And one of the ways we know that with this song, it is like, as I said, there is a tune that we sing, which I'm going to teach you, which is still in the tradition now, that is associated with this song. And it it itself is a traditional variant of this tune right here. It's not exactly the same, but it's a variant. And Willie talks about and names many variants of this song that are in many traditions. Again, I'll talk about this when we're talking about the poem itself, but this is called an Òran, which maybe you already know in Irish. I think it's Òran, Amhran, which is a form that's related to rest of Europe, which is continental Europe, and is also related to the medieval chanson. It's an old form of poetry, and the music fits with it as well, which is a very clearly symmetrical kind of poetry and symmetrical music. And we can see there here in the Scottish Gaelic tradition, there are other tunes which are beautiful ones. gCláirseach down, which I love. It's a gorgeous song that is still sung. Mali Bekok, which is from, I think, the early 19th century. It's another tune that's related. And this third one, Will You Go to Flanders, O Malio? It's another 19th century song. Will you go to Flanders, my Malio? You start to hear like, oh yeah, I know that tune. Sounds familiar. This is the other big reason, is that we know Bunting actually collected a tune, The Banks of Claudy, which is related to this tune that I'm teaching you. If you look up to the top right of this picture, we can see some scratching of Bunting's, which is only a fragment of The Banks of Claudy, and it's a highly ornate version that he got from, actually we don't know who this one came from. It doesn't say here on this actual manuscript. But later in manuscript 33, we see that he got this from Charles Byrne. We don't have a date though when he got it. This first picture on the upper left is part of his arrangement in the 1840 publication of the Ancient Music of Ireland of this song, The Banks of Claudy, again in a really ornate version. It's a little bit hard to even pick out the melody. It's so like ornamented. He writes in manuscript 33 at the bottom that this is the same tune as An Callan Down in the first volume, so his first publication from 1796. And that I put here, part of that, at least you can see, oopsie, I hate when it does that. Number 32, you can see at the bottom that that's a version of this Banks of Claudy, which starts way up high. It's kind of strange. Da, 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 dee, da, 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 dum, bum, bum, which is related to this same tune. So there's the traditional song, Banks of Claudy, which was moved all around the world to Scotland, Nova Scotia, Australia, even into Virginia. And there are English words that go with this, which are all virtually the same in all of these places, which is very interesting. This tune, it's a little bit hard to hear, but there is the same tune in there. It's a variant of this tune. Pretty Polly Oliver, if any of you know that from England, is related to this as well. It's another variant of this tune. One of the most interesting ones I liked was this one from France, from the manuscript of Bayeux. From the 14th century is this two-part piece. This is transcribed here from that, which he says is related to this tune. L'amour de Ruari Dao, ba da 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 dum, da 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 dum. It's loosely related, not so easy to hear. And here's a picture of the actual manuscript, which I think is so beautiful. Just wanted to show you that with the French words to all as well. L'amour de moi, blah 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 blah, en français. Okay. So here is my little quick transcription, oops, back, of this tune with the first verse. And we can try and play through this on our harps right now if you want. We don't need a C sharp. I couldn't get that out of my score that I already had. So we just need an F sharp for this one. One of the things about Gaelic, and we'll talk about this in the text part, is that the language is so flexible. Of course, it's probably true of Irish, but I don't know Irish. I know Gaelic. It's such a flexible language. And I used to say to people when I was learning it at first, one of the difficult things for me was that you have a word and you can change the ending of a word, like in other languages. You can change the vowels in the middle for reasons being to show cases and things like that. And you can change the beginning of the word to show gender and case. So the entire word can be in flux, and you have to remember how you can recognize a word. Anyway, so we see this. One of the most important things in Gaelic singing and music is the idea of stress and length. Super, super important in a word. Like you can actually say a completely different word if you don't say the stress the correct way. Like there's the word bata, which means boat, and that has it has an A with a stress mark, an accent on it. Bata means boat, but if you take the stress mark off and say bata, that means a stick, or like a stick something that you would hit some with. So bata is boat, but bata is stick, and it's like, what? You start to get used to hearing the length of things. And in singing, we have to actually be flexible and actually change the rhythms of the tune to fit with the text that we're singing. If we have a word on a long note that has a stress mark, that's fabulous. If you have a word without the stress mark, we have to say that word fast, and we have to go on to the next part of the word. Otherwise, it's not right. It could mean something else. So it brings up the problem of writing down a tune. Still, this Gaelic singing and tradition is still completely oral. It really is. And I learned these songs now with Kenna orally, hearing her sing them, and I sing them back, so that we really get these stresses and the lengths of the word, of the right syllables of the word. And when I write this tune down with verse 1, it fits with verse 1, but it doesn't fit with the refrain. It doesn't fit with the other verses. We have to actually change the rhythm so that they fit with the tune. But we'll get into that soon. Anyway, so for our purposes now, we can just go ahead and sing this or play this and sing it the way that I've written it in this melody. They say that Gaelic, oh yeah, when I have this up, you can't see me, right? You can only see the tune. Do you all have copies of this already printed off or no? Yes? Yes.
Yeah. Actually, James, we can see you as a little thumbnail on the side.
Okay. It's almost not even so totally important to see me on this, so it's not so terribly difficult. I like, when I'm doing these songs, to really keep the harp part as kind of as simple as possible. And in writing this down, I just did that for you. It's like really simple, playing the melody along with myself when I'm singing in the top hand. And the bottom, I'm just kind of marking in bigger note here that the other things can be played, the melody can be played over it. This song is, of course, if we looked at it closely, we'd see it's pentatonic. And it's pentatonic set up with do, re, mi, da, 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 da. So it definitely sounds major there, even though we do have a minor chord in there. And I'll quickly, as we play this, we don't even need so totally much damping. It seems like it can just be played and let the sounds ring, which is quite lovely, I find. I do, as I'm playing this, as I know it better, I actually start playing kind of ornamented little figures in the top hand. Though I'm singing the melody, I play a little bit of ornamentation in the top hand of my melody on the harp. And that actually comes from Bunting. We have a couple places where he wrote down that the singer was singing this, or the harper was singing this melody, which is just the plain singing melody, and playing this. And then he shows an ornamented line at the same time. And of course, these harpers he was writing down for were harpers that sang. So they would probably be doing more ornamentation on the harping. I think I do sometimes the other way around and ornament the tune that I'm singing, since I'm a singer that plays harp. So feel free to do that on your own. just quickly, when I'm learning a new song now, I actually totally learn the poem first as a poem, speaking and memorizing and working and working and working to memorize it till it's totally memorized. And then I might go sit and play the tune on the harp, but I don't put the song with the playing right away because it's too many things, too many things going on. So once that the words are really memorized, then I really feel comfortable doing my thing on the harp that I need to do. Anyway, so we can just start just trying to play this lovely song in D. This is probably lower than I would sing this. It's a low thing, but I didn't want to do a super high thing for all of you if you didn't know this song. So we'll try it in this nice low key, which fits on the harp here. One quick other thing as we start this is that they say Gaelic works in a rhythm of a triplet when we're speaking Gaelic. Sometimes they call it the lilting language. It has a da, 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 da feel to it, which would be almost a dotted rhythm, like 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. And it fits, noticing that we're in 6/8 here, that really fits with this kind of thing. That also shows if we had a word that was not stressed, like mullich would go da-da-dum, da-da-dum. And that's interesting, I think. That's totally where the idea of the Scotch snap came from. That's totally right in the language there. So if you look on your page here, on my page, we have Hamoran Moran Mullich. And even without getting into the rest of the poem yet, you'll notice that Moran has a stress mark, an accent on it. So that's a long syllable. So we have Moran Moran Mullich. Mullich does not have a long first syllable, so we have to go right to the second syllable. So hear the difference. Moran Moran Mullich, right? Mole chanje tunye gamchaum. So that just goes right on there. Anyway, we don't have to look at any more of the poem for right now. We'll do that in a second. But if you wanted to just do, you don't almost didn't even have to play. We could just do da dee da 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 dee da 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 dum dum da dum. So just do that first line. You can sing or play, just doing it on like a la 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 syllable or dee da 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 dum, right? Ready? So 1, 2, 1, 2. La da da dee da da dum da da dee da dum da dum. And then the second line goes a little bit higher. Da dee da dum da 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 dee da da dee da dum. How do you do that second line again? So we're starting on the D at the end of measure 4. Ready? 1, 2. Da dee da dum da 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 dee da dum da dee da dum. Let's do those first two lines together now. Ready? 2, 1, 2. Da dee da dum da da dum da dee da dum bum ba dum. Ba dee da dum ba dee da dum ba dum ba dee dum bum. Right? So if you got the first two lines down, there's only 2 more to go. So we're starting on that same B for line 3, which goes 1, 2. Da dee dum da 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 dum ba dee da dum ba dum. Last line. Ba dum ba dee da dum ba dum da dum bum ba da dum bum. Right? Cool. How's that going so far? It's not a hard melody, really. But we can already see by this, and I set it up on the page so you could see it, that this is really the Òran form, or the Òran form of a melody. It fits with the poetry. The poetry is very symmetrical in minstrel poetry, which is what the Òran is from. It usually has 4 lines of poetry and 4 lines of music like this. And the music often is in like nice big arches like that. It has a big arch form. Each line is an arch, and then the whole piece is a big arch. And that's again the Òran form. It's like the regularity and the symmetry of the poetry makes the music feel like it has symmetry and regularity to it as well, right? Just do that one more time on la 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 or doody doody do, and then we'll go into, if you want to try playing the melody, I mean the bass line along with it. Like I said, you can kind of leave a lot of the bass. I'm just letting ring and ring and ring away. I don't even have to damp that really. And it's just marking or mirroring. I often use that word, mirroring big notes in the melody, right? So let's try this one more time. Ready? 2, 1, 2. La dum ba dee da da dum ba da dum bum ba da dee ba dee da dum ba dee da dum ba him ba da dee 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 da dum or da dum da da dum bum da dee da dee dum bum. So even for me, if I'm not looking at the text, just singing la 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 la, I start to mix up those rhythms, those triplet rhythms, some of them as Scotch snap and some not, because you'll do it in the song both ways. It's not going to stay the same. We have to get used to that flexibility of the Gaelic, right? Very fun. So what if we'll come back to that in a minute, but why don't we take the text here, I'll bring this up. Oh, you can still see me, that's very cool. Which I tried to make a version of this to make this easier for you to learn all these words if you don't speak Gaelic. Haha. So what I did here on this version, which was a little bit fun to make, you can see I put underlined some of the words, and those actually are the strong beats in the melody. So ba bum da dum da dee 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 dee. Those are the strong beats, like the first beat of each measure if we were having written down music, right? So that's the syllable that's underlined. Now you notice, like I said earlier in that very first line, how we have moran, that's a stressed word syllable with this accent mark. So that has to be long. So we can do that in that rhythm, da dum ba dum ba da, right? Mulich, notice, is one of the stressed syllables here, but it's not a long one. So that's why I put the red arrow above it. So the red arrow is showing me, I do this when I'm learning a new song. I write a little arrow right over the word that shows me I have to move right on from mul and not hang out on mul. Because if I did that, it would be wrong. Right? Now, in Gaelic language, there's not that many sounds that are totally not in our language. One of them is in our language, but it's a little bit stronger in Gaelic, which is what I call a thick L. So it's almost like a Russian L, or as if you were to say milk, but milk with a way stronger L. So that L, that's thick L, happens when the L is next to what they call a broad vowel. So if you look in that word mulich up on the top line, the L is between a U and an A. Both the U and A are broad vowels. Actually, the only broad vowels are A, O, or U. And they're so wonderful and logical in Gaelic, way more than in English, in that when you have when you're in your spelling, if you want to have a broad vowel, a thick consonant like that, it has to have two broad vowels on either side of it, always, almost always, right? So as I said, mulich has a U and an A, so that shows us that L is going to be thick. L, mulich. And that's, if you were to sing in the Maud, I've competed in the Maud in Scotland, the big contest for Gaelic singing. that is probably the biggest first thing they will write down, that you're making a mistake if you're not saying oh when you need to. So that's an important thing. Let's see, what is another sound that they don't have? One is on the end of the second line, you'll see that word chaum. Actually, the word is kaum, it's C-O-M. And that is the word for chest. And it's actually the word for the resonator, the big resonating cavity of the harp is called the kaum also. So because this is in a certain case, we have to what they call lenite the beginning of the word. So that C, they call that softening the sound. Instead of saying kaum, they'll put an H after it, and that shows that I go chaum instead. So chaum, we don't use that sound, of course, really in English. And it's a little bit like Hebrew, actually, because there are not many languages that use that sound to begin a word, but Hebrew does, and so does Gaelic. Right? German doesn't. That always shows up in the middle of a word or at the end of a word. So there's a word in the middle of that second line, tunyachag. Tunyachag. That has a lot of sounds in it. So that has in the middle. And then at the very end of that word is the next sound that I wanted to show you, which is spelled in Gaelic either DH or GH. And that sound we definitely don't have in English, which is G. And I usually try to help people say that sound by saying it's kind of like a G, G that we have, except it's lengthened. So I say G short, but then I say G. I lengthen that G sound, and then that's the right sound for Gaelic. In Irish, that sound often is not there anymore. Gaelic is kind of a form of Irish it's split from Old Irish in about the 17th century. And so it includes lots of old things from Irish that they don't use anymore. So like in Irish, you would say tunyacha, and you would just say on the end of the word. But in Gaelic, you say tunyacha. You have to say that sound at the end of the word. That's a hard version of that, but okay, I think that's kind of the major things that are weirdly different. If you see two N's, there are lots of double N's in Gaelic. Those are it's kind of a wonderfully resonant N. It's usually your tongue is a little bit more up on your kind of the back of your hard palate. Than just a N like an Italian N at the front of your mouth. So down. Iain down, that has a kind of wonderful resonant nasally sound to it. Okay, so what if we just go through this first verse once here, and we might even do the first in Gaelic song. If you have a verse song, this very first thing we sing is verse 1, or they would call that Òran. I've written that here on the left. Òran means a verse. So we start with verse 1. And then you always sing the refrain after that. So the second thing we see here is not a verse, it's the refrain, right? And we'll go over that in a second, but let's start with this first verse just for fun. And why don't I just read a line at a time and then have you repeat it after me? I won't be able to hear you. I'm wondering if we don't have many people, I'm wondering if we even turn on our little microphones and see if it's a horrible mess. Do you think that would work, Karen?
Well, we could try it. If it doesn't work, we'll just.
If it doesn't work.
Oh, I see. It's not required.
Oh, okay, you don't have.
Optional.
You don't have to turn on your microphone, but if you want to, you can, and then I can also a little bit hear what you're doing.
Amanda has her hand up. Has their hand up.
Okay.
Thank you. Eilish did a thing where she asked us to mute ourselves. And then she asked one person to maybe, could you please sing this? And then or pronounce it. And then she would maybe correct a little thing, and everyone else would unmuted, talk along, but muted.
All right. Well, I don't know if there's anyone that's willing to do that. We could totally do that. Or,
we need to practice sometime, don't we?
I know, right?
Like practice in front of other people.
Yes, exactly. Cool. So Amanda, are you willing to do that? that would be super helpful if you want to try.
Bugger.
All right.
How long should I go?
We'll just do through this first verse and then we'll see how it works. If it doesn't work, well, I'll think of a different thing.
Moran MacMhuirich.
Good for you. Do you have some Gaelic already?
I jumped on the chance at Duolingo.
Oh God, good for you.
And even before that, it's
because
it's Scots Gaelic. I'm veering a bit more towards the Scots tradition than the Irish.
Excellent, me too. So what we'll do is I'll read a line at a time, and then you can all repeat even with your microphone off. And right now, Amanda will help us by repeating after me, especially since she already has some Gaelic. So that's cool. Okay. By the way, often people don't know in the difference here in Scotland, they say the name of the language is Gaelic. It has an ah sound. And they call the language in Ireland, they call it Gaelige, which is different. So we have Gaelic in Scotland and Gaelige in Ireland. Okay. So the first line would be Òran MacMhuirich with a nice thick L. You try.
Òran MacMhuirich.
Good. And MacMhuirich. There we go. And then we have Anje Tunyachag am Chaum.
Anje Tunyachag am Chaum.
Good for you. So I would say Tunyachag. That's kind of a sound. It's like a schwa. Do you all know the term schwa? We have lots of those in English. It's kind of an indiscriminate vowel. So it's kind of like Yes, Karen.
I have a question about the sound of the R that occurs in Moran. What kind of, is it like a palatalized R? Unfortunately, as a monoglot American, I have a really hard time with other kinds of R's.
I hear you. Well, you're lucky because in Gaelic, they use some of our American R sound, but not here. I would say Moran, with just a flip of the front of my tongue. Moran, right? And that happens a lot. And then sometimes when there's a lenited word, they would say R, they would use that. So you'll hear both of those. And instead of going into the reasons, I'll just try and say it and see if you can copy me. But if you can't hear it, please raise your hand or say something. So wow, Amanda, good for you. So Tunyachag, that last ADH is like a schwa. Tunyachag.
Tunyachag.
Beautiful, perfect. Very good ear. So next line, Gurbliana lium gachschachen.
Gurbliana lium gachschachen. Schachken.
Yeah, so note I talked about the broad vowels, but notice there are two slender vowels, which are I and E. And we actually do this in English. If I had the word C-I-T-Y, I would not say kitty, I would say city, because it's next to a slender vowel. So that happens in Gaelic too. And we have schachken. Because the S is next to an E, it goes sh, right? That becomes like a slender S instead of just s. Okay, so good for you. And that D in that word, schachken, g, is almost like a G. Schachken.
Schachken.
Yeah. So on our next line then would be O nach fachges Iain down.
O nach fachges Iain down.
Yeah,
down.
Very good. Down.
Down.
Bizarrely, that goes kind of like clown. That sound. Really beautiful, Amanda. Good for you. Then nancloining. Ooh, that's a wild word.
Nancloining.
Yeah, so we have the N next to an I, so that becomes slender, so that goes nye. Cloining.
Cloining.
Beautiful. So nancloining get nach feiking.
Nancloining get nach feiking.
Feiking. Yeah, that has a little H and it has an aspiration before the C. Feiking in Gaelic. Cool. Actually, that line is so heartrending because it's the only place in all of his poetry that he talks about his blindness. He's saying about Iain Breac, if I could see you, if I could hear you, if I could hear, but I can't see, but not see that you are in the land here. He's like referring to the fact that he would say, if I could see you here, but he can't see. So it's kind of heartbreaking, that little line right there. Quite beautiful. Then we have Ferdo Fersha, Hin Donaun.
Ferdo Fersha, Hin Donaun.
Good for you, beautiful. Then gCláirseach Movrons Marshnell.
gCláirseach Movrons Marshnell.
Yeah, good for you. So we have a few things in this line. That sound that's written AO in Gaelic actually comes from Nordic languages. It goes almost like a closed French sound. So we'd say Scoil. In Irish they would say Scoil now, but in Gaelic we say Scoil, right? And then Movron, that BH is a V sound. That's a lenited B. After the word moch, which means mine, we always lenite things that can be lenited, which includes a B. So gCláirseach Movrons Marshnell. Now we have the S there, believe it or not, is between an I and an E, even though they're far away in that word. So Marshnell, that has a slender S sound. And then our very last line, we have Marniach. So oops, that C is not supposed to be there. I don't know why that's there. Marniach, that C should not be there. The word for snow is Sneach. I love that word, S-N-E-A-C-H-D. But we have to lenite it. So they put an H after the S, and that just becomes like, it sounds like an H then. Marniach, Niach. We don't even hear the S. Marniach gok, Riachivtraum. And again, there's a little aspiration before the T in Chiv. Chiv.
Once more, please.
Oh, I see what's going on. Somehow a C got in there, and that shouldn't be there. And instead, there should be an N there. It should be S-H-N. Niach. So I'm sorry about that. Can replace that. That's why we're having trouble. Niach. S-H-N.
Marniach ogri. No, wait. Please, could you do it again?
Right. Marniach ogri achevtraum.
Marniach ogri achevtraum.
Good. Oak. And the in Gaelic, the G at the end of a word like that would sound like a K. It would mostly sound like a K when we're speaking it. In Irish, they would say G, but in Gaelic, it's oak. Right? It's kind of like a K. Cool. So what if we try and read this whole stanza together? You'll start to notice that we have lots of rhymes on the ends of the lines here. We have down, faun, traum. He's using that for a rhyme. Chaum at the end of every second line, right? There's another rhyme too, but I'm not seeing it here. I'll let you know though. So let's do this all together. Ready? So Òran, ready, go. Òran MacMhuirich, anje tunye gamchaum. Gebliana lum gachschachen, o nach fach gesien down. Nan kloinging get nach feiking, fer do fersche hin donaun. gCláirseach Movrons Marshnell, Marniach go gCláirseach. How did you do? Fabulous?
It's a good thing you couldn't hear me.
Okay, you sounded perfect to me. No, I'm joking. Even I made a mistake. So it's easy to do that. Shachen, shachen, because that has that CH sound that can be continued there. Why don't we now, let's go on to this little, the refrain, which is called the sheist in Gaelic. Notice that word over to the left here, S-E-I-S-T. So the S is next to an E, so it becomes slender. Sheist, sheist. Both S's actually become slender.
Hey, James, I'm going to jump in for 1 second.
Sure.
We're at the point where we're at the end of our scheduled time, but I'm going to let you guys go another 10 minutes.
Okay,
because of the delay to get started. So just wanted to jump in about 10 minutes.
Thanks for letting me know.
No problem. And I've got a survey that I'm going to drop in the chat. So I'm going to ask you guys that are there to before.
Okay, cool. Thanks. Oh, wow. I'm glad he did that because the clock I'm looking at stopped. So it looks like I have so much time and I don't. Okay, so let's look at this refrain. So at least you'll have the refrain with you. Now, as you probably know, I did a recording of myself singing and playing this and a recording of me pronouncing the words in rhythm like this. So you can go ahead and totally work with that. I would to help get the sounds to sink into your ear and your mouth. It's important that you actually, when you play with it and work with it, that you actually say the sounds out loud, because that's how you'll be able to start to learn to do it. So this next, let's do the sheist now. So head mi horo yalla big. So our TH sound there is a lenited T. So that sounds like an H. So instead of tear, we'd say hair, right? So that line would be hair mi horo yalla big. That GH in that line goes yeah, yeah, right? Hair mi horo yalla big, right? I'll say it and then you repeat after me. We don't have to have anyone say it out loud, but ready? Snahoro chalan hi. Second line. Snahoro chalan hi, right? So that's a nice thick L between those two A's. Chalan, right? Next line is the same. Oh, we're lucky. Her mi horo yalla bake. Say that again. Her mi horo yalla bake. Right? Snahoro chalan hi. Right? Then he switches it a little around here. So we have chalan hi ho huravo. Right? Chalan hi ho huravo. And then snahoro chalan hi. We did that before. Snahoro chalan hi. And then the last two lines. Gerfate vona trahen shin. Ready? Gerfate vona trahen shin. Nach romo grach senchir. Nach romo grach senchir. Wow, so that word on the last line, grach, means beloved, my beloved. Grach, it has a g on the end, but here it's lenited because it comes after mo. So we have mo grach. Ooh, there's lots of those like continuous G sounds in that, right? What fun. So, do you remember the melody? Right? 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 Cool. So if you have your sheet with the first verse on it, what if we try and sing this first verse? I'll sing it and you can sing along. And then you can tell me how you did, since I won't be able to hear you. Ready? 2, there's our low note. Ready? 2, 1, 2. Amoran moran hule chanje tunye ke gam kaun. Gebrian helium ga Bach shaken ona Bach si ein down. Nan kloyin get nak Viking fed of fish in the noun. Scoil mofrons marshnia marnia ko kriachiv drown. How'd you do? Okay, following along? What fun. I bet you're starting to get the melody into your head though. It's not a hard one. What if we try to do the refrain? That again, in a céilí, if I were singing all the verses, you would sing the refrain along with me anyway. And it's lots of repetitive sounds. It just means, as it says, hear me means I will say, I shall say. So hear me, horo yalabek is just, I will say horo yalabek, right? So let's try that once, just the refrain. Ready? 2, 1, 2. Hear me horo yalabek, sna horo chalanihi. Hear me horo yalabek, sna horo chalanihi. Chalanihi hohurevo, sna horo chalanihi. Gevatte von Trahenchen nach Romoi Reichsenchiel. Right? Want to do that very last 2 lines once again, because those are important. That's so lovely. Again, that's what opens it up to, oh, it's been so long since I saw my beloved. That could be anybody, to all these people that are singing. So that's why people loved this song. Right? So notice we have the red lines there on those ones. Gevatte von Trahenchen. Sing that. Gevatte von Trahenchen. And then the last line. Nach Romoi Reichsenchiel. Repeated. Nach Romoi Reichsenchiel. And put those 2 lines together. Gevatte, ready? Gevatte von Trahenchen nach Romoi Reichsenchiel. Right? Do you like this song? Hooray! Oh, I think it's such a beautiful song. It's really a masterful song. I don't know when we're needing to stop now. Is Tate here to tell me?
Yep, we got about 3 minutes left.
All right.
And before everybody leaves, if you guys are cool, I'm going to take a screenshot of everybody once. We'll have James stop his screen share when he's done, and we'll put up everybody, and I'll take a screenshot of everybody here.
Okay, cool. I'll definitely do that. So if we look at this next page that I have here, I won't make you sing that all right now off the top of your head because you won't have time to do it. But you can just notice the stresses I put on the underlines, on which words go with the strong beats of the music, and those red lines that show we have to move through the short syllables and not hang out on them, right? That's super important. The very last verse at the bottom where it says, actually we would sing she toromatok. Toromat, remember, is Norman. That's an important name in the Gaelic, in the MacLeod family. And of course, since this song is from 1683, this Toromat that he's singing about is probably Iain Breac's heir, a young boy. And we know that he had another heir that died as a child, and it's probably this one, Toromat. There's even a painting of him at Dunvegan that shows he sings all these other verses about how he misses Iain Breac and how he's a wonderful soldier and how they met in Edinburgh. The second verse here at the top actually shows about how they met at Edinburgh. And he's so sad about that. But then at the end he goes, well, if we have Toromat, if we have Norman here, I can be happy again because I know he'll grow into stature and become the next chief, even though poor thing dies. So alas, that's a little bit about that. On the last 2 lines of that last verse, it talks about Macraha, actually, which might be the name of the MacRae family. But MacRaha means a great warrior, a great son, the son of, what is the word that I have written here? Son of good omen, son of fortune, that means really, MacRaha. So he's calling Toramat the MacRaha here, an important thing. Anyway, I wish I had time to sing through the other verses with you. I hope you can learn them on your own by listening to my speaking and singing those. And I swear, if you have any questions or anything, you're totally welcome to email me. And I'd be happy to go over some of the pronunciation, et cetera, with anyone, because I love this stuff. So that's the end of that. I guess, does anyone have any questions off the top here before we stop that I can answer? If not, no? Okay, cool. Well, it was such fun to work on this with you today. I hope you got a little view of Dunvegan, thank you, and of Ruari Dao and more interest in his songs. It's possible I might be doing a big workshop on all of his songs next year, so we'll see what happens, who knows. But I would love that, of course. It'd be super fun. And hopefully in person, right? Anyway, I hope you all have a fabulous rest of the festival and maybe see you in the tea rooms. And have a wonderful summer.